Brandon, before we get to talking to Tom Haberstroh and some interesting news out of the NFL in terms of a player report card for their organizations, we probably need to address what was the major news of yesterday, surely going to be one of the big sports stories of the week, involving former Georgia defensive lineman and current draft prospect Jalen Carter. We got the news on Wednesday, literally as Jalen Carter was being in the medical exams at the combine and getting ready to come up to the podium. He was up next to be one of the speakers, as a lot of players at the combine will go and have time in front of the media, get asked questions before they get started with a lot of the events of the weekend. Right in that window was when Jalen Carter was charged with reckless driving and racing in connection with a crash back in January that killed a teammate and a recruiting staffer on Georgia. The Athens-Clarke County Police Department issued an arrest warrant obtained Wednesday by the Associated Press that alleged that Carter was racing his 2021 Jeep Trackhawk against the 2021 Ford Expedition that was a school car driven by the recruiting staffer, the 24-year-old Chandler LaCroix, who was unfortunately killed in that January 15th crash, along with Devin Willock, who was an offensive lineman for the Bulldogs. Now, Brandon, this story is extremely complicated now and extremely sad as the details that have now emerged, because for anyone that doesn't remember, that crash was originally reported by police as a single vehicle accident where speed was the mitigating factor involved. Now, with what we've seen here, the police have come out, and the details released by the investigation Wednesday cited evidence that Jalen Carter and LaCroix were, quote, operating their vehicles in a manner consistent with racing shortly before the crash. They talked about the evidence that led to that, but police investigators have determined, quote, also that alcohol impairment, racing, reckless driving, and speed were significant contributing factors to the crash, and a toxicology report indicated that LaCroix's blood alcohol concentration was 0.197, more than twice the legal limit in Georgia at the time of the crash, and that SUV had been traveling about 104 miles per hour before the crash. We got statements from Kirby Smart, the Georgia head coach, saying the charges announced today are deeply concerning, especially as we're still struggling to cope with the devastating loss of two beloved members of our community. We will continue to cooperate fully with the authorities while supporting these families and assessing what we can learn from this horrible tragedy. There was also then a statement released by Jalen Carter on social media that morning as well, that said, "This morning I received a telephone call from the Athens, Georgia Police Department informing me that 2 misdemeanor warrants have been issued against me for reckless driving and racing. Numerous media reports have also circulated this morning containing inaccurate information concerning the tragic events of January 15th. It is my intention to return to Athens to answer the misdemeanor charges against me and to make certain that the complete and accurate truth is presented. There's no question in my mind that when all of the facts are known, that I will be fully exonerated of any criminal wrongdoing." And Brandon, I think that's what a lot of people are looking for here. This is a situation where we have way more questions than we do answers at this juncture. We had more questions dumped into our lap because this is still a tragedy. All of this information just makes it even more so, if that was humanly possible. 2 young people lost their lives at a time where this team was celebrating a joyous occasion that everyone had been a part of. And now the allegations that there could have been more people connected with that and that alcohol was involved in the crash just add to that sadness now, with even more time removed from that process. I can understand why people would question the timing of this. This information coming up, again, minutes before he was supposed to step to the podium and talk at what is more or less the biggest job interview for these young players at the NFL Combine. And also for the Athens Police Department, why this was initially reported as a single car crash, if now, according to this and the reports from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, there was documents obtained saying they had reason to believe there were multiple cars at the crash site initially, and a lot of this information that's just coming out now. We are right to have questions about that process and why it's fleshed out this way. I just don't have those answers at the time, other to say than this is incredibly sad.
Incredibly sad. I mean, as you said, another sad chapter to an already sad story. The fact that they're already dealing with two tragic losses after the highs of winning a championship. Mike, we obviously at Notre Dame unfortunately know what it's like to lose a member of our staff. Not to make any comparisons, but there's a heaviness and a dark cloud that comes with this news anyways, and for it to be exacerbated by Jalen Carter, the potential number 1 draft pick, coming out of this great Georgia Bulldogs team that we just saw finish, and the way they finished, Mike, it just, I hate to bring it to the football now, but it is just incredibly sad, and I'm hoping that we do get the answers.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. There's so much, I'm sure, still raw emotion around this that for the families that are involved, if this hadn't been information that they knew before, if this is new information, you do want to be sensitive to that. But Brandon, and this is per the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, in a video, part of this is also going to be who knew what and when. Mm-hmm. That's going to be the big question that people have for the Athens Police Department, because according to, this is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that in a videotaped interview that night, Jalen Carter gave the officer an inconsistent account of what he knew about the crash. The documents reviewed by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution show Carter first said that he heard the wreck from an apartment complex nearly a mile away. Later, he said he witnessed it from a shorter distance, telling the officer that he both had been behind and beside the car as it crashed. Carter denied racing and said he had not been driving fast, but he told the officer the occupants of the car that crashed were intoxicated, the documents say. Carter said that he had seen the group downtown. The officer saw no sign that Carter had been drinking, however, according to the records. And so that's going to, I think, be the crux of it as it concerns with Carter, who's, again, charged with 2 misdemeanors here. So racing is a misdemeanor offense in the state of Georgia. It carries a fine of up to $1,000 plus court costs and fees and a sentence of up to 12 months in jail. It is the same exact figures for the reckless driving misdemeanor charge in Georgia. You know, Brandon, to your point, it does feel crass to bring up the football portion of this now. A lot of people are going to have thoughts about that and about the timing of this and about what this will do to his draft status. I am going to reserve a lot of those thoughts until we have more information about what's going to happen from here on out, and if at this point we can trust any version of what the truth is around this, since that truth has shifted so dramatically here in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I keep thinking about him as well, and the level of guilt aside, the type of person that it can come through on the other side of this type of trial, this type of investigation. I don't know.
I think of all the players involved there. I mean, there were reports then of, you know, once the crash had happened, other players showing up, understandably, because one of their teammates and a staffer, you know, were then killed on the scene there. And so for all of those players, like you said, we unfortunately know far too much about loss of teammates, loss of people on our staff, and that's something that sticks with you forever. And it's going to be associated with that memory of this time in their life that was supposed to be this celebration and this joyous time and what they had all accomplished together. And it's going to be impossible to disassociate this tragedy from that. And so, again, certainly, thoughts and prayers to everybody that is involved in this situation. The Georgia football family that did lose 2 people, very important to them, the families of the deceased. But unfortunately, this is a situation now where we do have more questions than answers, and so we are going to have to wait and see exactly what happens next. As now it sounds like, according to his statement, Jalen Carter will head back to Athens, and they will start to deal with some of the legality of this process here, as we are also staring down the upcoming NFL draft and all of these other deadlines that'll be a part of that process. Boom. Money in the bank.